Abbott of Texas is in the running to be the next Donald Trump. And by that, I mean he's a wannabe fascist in chief of the United States. He's padding his anti-democratic resume by not only signing one of the most extreme anti-women's reproductive rights laws in the country since Roe v. Wade, but he also signed a severely restrictive voting rights bill. In fact, under complete Republican control, the Texas legislature has taken a sharp right turn this year. They have enacted an enormous list of conservative priorities on abortion, on transgender rights, on teaching about racism in schools, on voting, anything you think is important, they are destroying. And conservatives across the country are hoping that as goes Texas, so goes the nation. How can we stop this? Joining us to discuss this, Gaby Goldstein, co-founder of Sister District. She's here to discuss the single most effective way to combat suppressive attacks from Republican-led state legislatures. Gaby, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We have so much to do. How can we stop this craziness? And are we too late?
We are not too late. That's the good news. I loved the Marianne Williamson clip providing such a positive vision for the future. And it's completely within our grasp. We just have to focus on the pieces where we can really have leverage. And my organization, Sister District, focuses on building progressive power in state legislatures. We started this organization because we saw a gap in organizing capacity, in resources, going to progressives running for state legislature and serving in state legislatures. These are such overlooked venues of power. You mentioned what is going on in the Texas state legislature. This sort of regressive policy laboratory is a true skill of the Republican Party. They have been at this game for decades, weaponizing state legislatures for their own regressive policy goals. And the good news is that because these are such small races compared to congressional races, compared to statewide or national races, we can really affect the outcome of these elections with far less money, far less resources than it would take to flip, a higher level of office of the ballot. So we see a huge return on investment for your volunteer time, your volunteer dollar, going to state legislative races and supporting great progressive state legislators, because this is where the rubber hits the road, right? Everything that you just mentioned, voting rights, reproductive freedom issues and laws. Look at what's going on with COVID and the state level restrictions around masking and vaccine mandates and all the rest. This is really where the rubber hits the road.
As you mentioned, they are way ahead of us with a decade or more of laying down this conservative agenda. How fast do you think we can undo this or at least block it? I mean, they're trying to get everywhere with their ideas. Virginia.
Yeah. Right. So I hate to say Democrats are tardy to the party when it comes to paying attention to state legislatures. Jane Mayer wrote a really great book called Dark Money that really traces the conservative interest and infrastructure building project around state stuff going back 100 years. So we are really kind of behind the ball when it comes to understanding the importance of these races and investing in them. And the good news is, I think, especially with this new round of redistricting coming up, I think the public is coming to understand the power of state legislatures, how they control redistricting and therefore, drive polarization in Congress and in our state houses, and how the trickle down effects of who controls our states really controls, often increasingly the outcome of our lives, our health, our safety. So, we're behind the ball, but we're working really hard. And there is a good cadre of organizations that are focused on this in the progressive space and working overtime. I mean, this year, you mentioned Virginia. This year, the entire lower chamber of Virginia is up for re-election, as well as the governor's mansion. And we and allies on the ground in Virginia worked tirelessly to flip both chambers of the state legislature in 2019. they've only had this Democratic trifecta for 2 years and have already capped insulin prices, raised the minimum wage, rolled back abortion restrictions. But it's really in jeopardy this year. And so folks really have an opportunity to get involved this year, help us hold on to that beautiful blue trifecta in Virginia and roll that momentum into the midterms. I think, we're all nervous about next year for the congressional races, Senate races, and also for state legislatures. So, democracy is a muscle. We have to exercise it all the time. And we have really great opportunities this year in Virginia to keep that going.
I literally just ran into in the coffee shop a state representative, not from my district, who she said, well, I was kind of involved and then no one else was going to run. So they're like, how about you? So I just did it with the help of sister district. Now, her name, of course, is escaping me at this moment, but your organization has really been on the ground. How does it change the game of keeping Republican attacks on our rights on a state level? How does it change the game that we can't rely on courts to uphold precedent and we can't really rely on Congress to act to keep our rights in check? How does this change the game?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what we're seeing in the Supreme Court is didn't come out of nowhere. There has been a long-term conservative project in jurisprudence to narrow federal protections and to expand state level rights, right? The idea of states' rights. This is a banner that was adopted by conservative aligned Americans back to the founding of our country. So this is a very long-term project that has kind of come to roost in the current Supreme Court. And we're seeing decisions, which we should expect, that curtail federal protections and really kick the can back to states in issues around voting rights, in issues around partisan gerrymandering, certainly in the repro space, and in lots and lots of other areas. And this will continue for at least the next generation, right? We've got the Supreme Court that we've got. Congress is, the gridlock is astonishing. It is, to have a federal trifecta and not be able to accomplish some basic goals really highlights the importance of states and the fact that we can't rely on Congress. We can't rely on this razor thin trifecta to, and majority in the Senate to get rid of the filibuster. And we can't rely on the courts. They're not, these are larger long-term projects that don't align with what with our policy goals. So states matter. And I'm huge on the idea of cultivating a narrative about progressive federalism, right? The idea that states' rights has a negative connotation because, of course, it's been associated with so much regressive policy. We got to turn that around because this is not coming back around anytime soon. It's not an either or in terms of looking for federal protections and building power in states. We have to do both. But progressives historically have not done both. We've really overly relied on a federal strategy to secure our rights and policies that we want. And we've really let the state strategy, just not develop. So we got to turn it around.
It's interesting because I work in the media. Obviously, I teach about media on a college level. And so much of what we're talking about right now is media consolidation and the loss of investigative or even just regular journalism on the local level. Thinking back over your work with Sister District, do you see over maybe the last however many, it's even been like less than a decade in which this is really amped up, do you see how the loss of local journalism has played a part in people just kind of checking out of their local politics?
1,000,000%. It's an absolute crisis. The loss of local media is an absolute crisis. It's the consolidation of media really drives the nationalization of politics in a way that's very corrosive at the local level. And we saw this in 2020, I think, all over the country, where national narratives, Republican narratives around stuff like defund the police and socialism and these sorts of things had a really really outsized impact on Democrats running for local office because there wasn't enough of a countervailing voice to really be talking about the local issues that matter, because those were not the issues, primarily that candidates at the local level were really running on it for state legislative campaigns, but that nationalization of media and of politics can be really detrimental at the local, at keeping local civic engagement alive and keeping folks aware and informed about truly local issues that affect them.
Let's talk about which races are on your radar right now. We spoke about Virginia. Where else are we looking at? Right before you, we had Brittany Ramos de Barros, who is running in Staten Island's 11. It's not the local state house, but it's kind of an interesting grassroots candidate who just looked around and said, something has to be done. And she just stepped up to do it. I guess I have two questions now. Which races are on your radar? And what would you say to people who are looking around who may actually think, maybe I should run?
Yeah, I mean, so, redistricting is happening now. Hopefully your viewers are following along in their own states. Every 10 years, we hold a census in this country. And then after the census, when we figure out who lives where and how many people live where, we redraw all the maps for Congress and state legislatures all over the country. It happens once a decade. It's happening right now. State legislatures control the process in most states for both congressional maps and state legislative maps. After the 2010 census and during that redistricting cycle, Republicans controlled so many state houses that they were able to run the game and gerrymander the F out of states all across the country. We're still dealing with that. And so what's happening now is that a lot of those Republicans who gerrymandered their way into power are now getting to draw new maps again. So there's a lot of concern about how these maps are going to turn out, and it really affects next year, right, for Congress and for state leg, because folks are going to be running next year under maps that are getting drawn right now. There's a lot of opportunity for folks to get involved in the redistricting process. I would check out an organization called All on the Line, which is an affiliate of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, chaired by Eric Holder. And they can help you figure out where to show up at meetings on Zoom, how to submit testimony, all the rest. But that's really going to, determine what is competitive next year for Democrats, for progressives. And so on my radar for next year, very high on the list are both Arizona and Michigan. Those state legislatures are within flipping distance. We're down just a couple in Arizona and just a handful in Michigan. And both of those states have independent commissions that are going to be drawing their new maps as opposed to their Republican-controlled legislatures. So those two states next year, I think, are prime for flipping blue. But lots of other states too. It'll just depend on how the maps turn out. One other thing I wanted to just say about Texas, people think Texas is out of reach for Democrats and all the rest. Only 11,000 votes separated Democrats from holding the majority in the Texas State House. So, that's not a lot of votes, and we need to get them in the right places. But no state is off limits for us. We have to be organizing everywhere. People need to run everywhere. There's a wonderful organization that I'm so proud to be partners with called Run for Something, and they'll help you run for whatever you want to run for. And so, there's really some great infrastructure, and I love folks to get involved, and, we've all got to do it.
I love that. Run for something. That's exactly where people who may want to run start. Like, well, I might want to do something, but how do I know? Run for something. That's really perfect. Gaby Goldstein is, she's a co-founder of Sister District. I do thank you for coming on the program today. You can follow Gaby on Twitter at Gaby_Goldstein. I had a final question for you about Texas. Do you think that the people those 11,000 or 40,000 or 100,000 people who maybe just sat out the election or didn't think anything was going to happen, do you have any indication that maybe they're aware of what's going on and that they need to really get involved?
Absolutely. There is such
Are
amazing.
people like, what's happened? Now I live in some third world.
There are incredible organizers on the ground in Texas. I just want to shout out Texas Organizing Project, TOP, and many others that are doing the year-round community-based organizing that is absolutely bedrock to our ability to engage people in civic stuff and turn out the vote, right? So Texans are fired up. There's, but I will say those organizations need more support, right? There's always, kind of a push and pull between, folks, should I give to a national organization? Should I give to a local organization? And, your donor portfolio is what it is, but I would encourage folks to look locally too. Same with abortion funds and so forth. There's usually great folks on the ground doing the work. We don't always need to start a new project or start a new thing. And in Texas, there's some really great infrastructure. So I'm extremely optimistic about Texas. And if we can get the local folks the resources they need, if we can get great folks to run for state ledge, the trends are going in our direction. And it may not be next year, but it's coming up that we're going to flip Texas blue.
That's great. Thank you, Gaby. You've made me feel so much better. The news makes you feel like we're turning into ultra conservative religious state when really we're the United States and there's still hope. So thanks for coming on the program and making me feel better.
Thanks so much.
All right. Don't forget to follow Gaby at Gaby__ Goldstein on Twitter. You're watching Act Now. I'm Julianna Forlano. If you're new to the show, we try to follow what's happening in the progressive action sphere. So we thank you for your eyeballs. I thank you for your earballs. But don't forget to subscribe and put your comments in. I do notice people are writing in with the groups that they want coverage of, some things that whatever you're involved in, hit us up. We've got an info at act.tv. That always gets to me, and I will be putting your projects and your activism right here on these airwaves. Thanks so much to everyone who's worked on this program to make it come to life. I'm Julianna Forlano. We will see you Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our Occupy Wall Street look back and, celebratory anniversary, 10 years, baby. Thanks for watching.